It's funny what you remember. It's not always the big things. The moments that end up in the newspapers. Sometimes, it's the small stuff. I remember the smell of fresh cut lumber when my father-in-law and I were fixing up the second floor of the duplex on Chase Street. I remember the way the afternoon sun slanted through the windows in the living room, catching dust motes dancing in the air. I remember my wife, Janet, humming a tune from the radio while she painted the kitchen, a little smudge of white on her cheek. This was 1974, in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, a quiet, blue-collar town where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a steady, predictable pace. We'd just bought half of a duplex. Janet's parents, John and Mary, bought the other half. It seemed perfect, a good home to raise our 2 young daughters, Dawn and Heather, with family right next door. The house itself was nothing special. It was old, sure, built sometime in the late 1800s. But it was solid. It had good bones. As they say, we got it for a good price. Especially after the damage from Hurricane Agnes a couple of years prior. We put a lot of sweat equity into that place, making it our own. For a while there, it was our American dream. Printed on cheap newsprint, maybe, but it was ours. Looking back, I can't tell you the exact day it started. There was no thunderclap, no ghostly wail in the middle of the night. It was more like a slow leak, a dripping faucet in the dead of night that you notice, but you're too tired to get up and fix. The first red flag, if you can even call it that, was the stain. It was on a new carpet we just installed in the living room. It was a faint, ugly, brownish blotch that hadn't been there the day before. Janet was convinced one of the kids had spilled something, but we couldn't get it out. We scrubbed until the fibers were raw, but it remained. A faint discoloration. A week later, it was gone, just vanished. We chalked it up to a trick of the light. Or maybe the cleaning solution finally did its job. We wanted a rational explanation, so we found one. Then came the appliances. The television in the living room would switch on by itself, always to a channel with nothing but static, hissing into the quiet house. I'm a practical guy. I worked for the state. I understood how things worked. So, I checked the wiring. I took the back panel off. Checked every connection. Found nothing. I told Janet it was probably a power surge. A common thing in an old house with old wiring. The new radio we'd bought for the kitchen started doing it too. It would click on, the dial spinning past stations as if an invisible hand were searching for something, before settling on static. Again, faulty electronics. It's easy to explain away the oddities when they happen weeks, even months apart. You live your life, you forget, you move on. The first time I felt a genuine sense of unease, the kind that makes the little hairs on your neck prickle, was with my tools. I was a tinkerer, always fixing things. I had my workbench in the basement, everything in its place. One evening, I went down to fix a leaky faucet handle and my favorite wrench was gone. Not misplaced, gone. I searched for an hour, getting more and more frustrated. I accused the kids. I accused Janet. We had a small, stupid argument about it. The next morning, there it was, sitting right in the middle of the kitchen table, gleaming under the light. Nobody had any idea how it got there. Janet swore she hadn't touched it. The kids were asleep. It was just there. That was the first time I felt that icy finger of wrongness trace its way down my spine. It was a violation of the basic rules of the world. Things don't just move on their own. But still, you push it down. You have to. You have a job to go to. Kids to raise. You can't let your imagination run away with you over a misplaced wrench. The slow burn continued for years. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. A gradual erosion of our sense of safety. The smells started around 75. They would come and go without warning. Sometimes it was a faint, cloying perfume, like cheap funeral flowers. Other times, it was a sharp, acrid odor, like sulfur or something long dead, hidden in the walls. We'd search the house, check the drains, the garbage, the basement, but we'd never find the source. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it would be gone. The sounds came next. At first, it was just the house settling, the groans and creaks of an old building. But then we started hearing scratching sounds. Not mice or rats. This was a deliberate, rhythmic scratching from inside the walls. From under the floorboards. It would travel. We'd hear it in the kitchen. And then a moment later. In the bedroom upstairs. It was impossible. Then came the whispers. You'd be sitting there, reading the paper, and you'd hear a faint, sibilant murmur from the corner of the room, just on the edge of hearing. You'd look up, and there'd be nothing but silence. A heavy, expectant silence. I remember one night, Janet and I were in bed. The kids were staying over at my in-laws' side of the house. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. A dead, moonless night. The scratching started, right under our bed. It was loud this time. Frantic. Scrape, 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 like a dog trying to dig its way out of a coffin. I'm not a small man, and I'm not easily scared. But I was frozen. Janet grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. We just lay there, listening, not daring to breathe. It went on for what felt like an eternity. Then, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. That was the night the denial started to crumble. That wasn't the house settling. That was something else. Things began to escalate. The quiet annoyances became deliberate acts of vandalism. Pictures would be thrown from the walls. Drawers would be pulled out. Their contents dumped on the floor. One morning, we came downstairs to find deep, gouge-like scratches running down the length of the newly painted hallway door. They looked like they'd been made by an animal. But no animal could have done that. There were 3 distinct marks, running parallel, dug deep into the wood. The cold spots were another thing. You could be walking from the living room to the kitchen and pass through a pocket of air that was 20 degrees colder than the rest of the house. It was a damp, clinging cold that felt old, ancient. It would raise goosebumps on your skin and leave you with a lingering sense of dread. Our daughters started seeing things. Dawn, our eldest, would talk about the old lady in her closet. She said the lady was all black and flickered like a broken TV. We told her it was just bad dreams. Nightmares. What else could we say? How do you tell your child that you're scared in your own home? 2. Then Heather, our youngest, started screaming in the middle of the night. When we'd rush in, she'd be sitting bolt upright in bed, pointing at the empty doorway, crying about the man with yellow eyes. The first time I saw one of them, I thought I was having a stroke. I was coming up the basement stairs. The door at the top of the landing was closed. Through the frosted glass panel, I saw a silhouette. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and pure black. It wasn't just a shadow, it was a void. A patch of darkness that seemed to drink the light around it. It stood there for a second, perfectly still. I froze on the step, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel a malevolence radiating from it. A pure, distilled hatred that was as real as the cold air on my face. Then, it just dissolved. It didn't walk away. It came apart, like smoke in the wind. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, my hands shaking on the railing. Before I could force myself to open the door, the hallway was empty. After that, the dam broke. We were no longer living in our house. We were occupying it alongside something that hated us. The physical assaults began subtly. Janet was the first. She was walking down the stairs one day when she felt a firm, distinct push in the middle of her back. She tumbled down the last few steps, thankfully unhurt but terrified. There was no one there. The air was still. I felt it too. A few weeks later, a shove while I was getting out of the shower. A violent tug on my blankets at night. Then came the pig. To this day, my blood runs cold when I think about the pig. I was in the kitchen. It was a normal Tuesday evening. Janet was cooking dinner. I saw something out of the corner of my eye. In the doorway to the dining room. I turned my head, and there, for just a split second, I saw it. It was the shape of a man. But its head was that of a monstrous, snarling pig, with glowing red eyes. It was there, and then it was gone. I didn't even have time to scream. I just stood there, my mouth dry, the smell of pork and sulfur filling my nostrils. I didn't tell Janet. How could I? How could I describe that level of insanity? The thing is, evil is patient. It chips away at you. It isolates you. It makes you question your own mind. Janet and I started arguing more. Our nerves frayed to the breaking point. We were exhausted, constantly on edge. Sleep offered no escape. The nights were the worst. We'd hear screams, not from us, or the kids. Horrible, Guttural screams filled with agony and rage, coming from inside the house. But from nowhere at all. We'd hear a phantom marching. The heavy tramp of boots pacing back and forth in the empty upstairs hallway. The activity always seemed to follow a pattern. It would build and build, a crescendo of terror, and then it would stop for weeks, sometimes a month. It would give us just enough time to catch our breath, to start to think maybe, just maybe, it was over, to hope, and then, just as we started to relax, it would come back, worse than before. It was toying with us. It was feeding on our fear. The violation. That's the part that's hardest to talk about. It's the part that leaves a permanent stain on your soul. It started happening to me in the late 70s. I would be asleep, and I'd be woken by a presence in the room. I'd be paralyzed, unable to move or scream. A phenomenon they now call sleep paralysis. But this was more. I would feel a weight on the bed. See a shape coalesce out of the darkness next to me. It was female, but hideously so. Its form shifted, sometimes beautiful, sometimes reptilian and monstrous. With long, clawed fingers, it would hold me down. It would assault me. I can't put into words the sheer, mind-breaking horror of it. It was a combination of physical violation and profound psychic terror. The feeling of absolute powerlessness. Of being used by something utterly inhuman and filled with a cold, ancient lust. I would wake up gasping, covered in a cold sweat, with scratches on my body and a sense of such deep shame and defilement that I wanted to die. I couldn't tell Janet. For a long time, I couldn't tell anyone. It was my secret, shameful burden. I felt like I was going insane. Was this real? Was I dreaming it? But the scratches, the physical exhaustion the next day, they were real. Years later, Janet would confess to me that she had experienced something similar. A shadowy male figure holding her down, violating her. We had both been suffering in silence, too ashamed and terrified to speak of it. By the early 1980s, we were desperate. This wasn't a haunting anymore, this was a siege. We were prisoners in our own home. My daughter, Dawn, was once dragged from her bed by an unseen force. We found her huddled and crying in her closet. The television flew across the room, smashing against the far wall. A chandelier shook so violently we thought it would be torn from the ceiling. We finally broke down and did the one thing we'd been avoiding because it felt like a final admission of defeat. An admission that we were dealing with something beyond the realm of science or reason. We went to the Catholic Church. Getting them to listen was an ordeal in itself. You can't just walk into a rectory and say, "Father, my house is haunted by a demon." They look at you like you're crazy. Or a crank. But we were persistent. We were a good Catholic family. We were desperate. Finally, a priest, Father O'Leary, agreed to come to the house and bless it. He walked through the rooms, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers. The house was quiet while he was there, deceptively quiet. The moment he left, all hell broke loose. A horrific, banging sound started inside every wall, like a giant was trying to smash its way out. The stench of rot filled the air, so thick we had to open all the windows in the middle of winter. That night, 3 distinct, loud knocks sounded on our front door, a mockery of the Holy Trinity. When I opened it, the porch was empty and covered in fresh snow, with no footprints. We had done more than fail to get rid of it. We had made it angry. We had challenged it. The church authorized further investigation. They sent priests and laypeople who documented the phenomena. They recorded the rapping sounds, the disembodied voices, the temperature drops. They saw the black masses form and dissipate. They concluded we weren't crazy. They concluded we were dealing with something powerful and demonic. Several informal prayers of exorcism were performed. Each time, the result was the same: a brief period of calm, followed by a violent, vengeful backlash. The demon was strong. It was mocking their attempts. It was winning. It was one of the church's investigators who gave us the phone number. He said, "There are some people who specialize in this. They're controversial, but they're the best." Their names were Ed and Lorraine Warren. When the Warrens arrived in 1986, it was like the cavalry showing up to a battle that had already been lost. Ed was a bulldog of a man, a religious demonologist, confident and direct. Lorraine was quiet, clairvoyant. The moment she stepped into the house, her face went pale. She later told us it was like walking into a cancer She said, "Jack, there is a powerful demon in your home." Finally, someone who understood. Someone who didn't look at us with pity or disbelief. The Warrens' investigation was methodical. They set up audio recorders, infrared cameras. They provoked it. Ed would stride through the house, holding a crucifix, shouting in Latin, demanding the demon show itself. And it would respond. The recorders picked up clear, guttural voices saying our names, telling us to get out. Lorraine would walk into a room and immediately sense what had happened there. She described the pig-like creature I had seen. She described the succubus that had tormented me. She said there were actually 4 spirits in the house, 2 minor, mischievous ones, a violent spirit of an old woman, and commanding them all, a powerful, ancient demon. She said the demon was feeding on the energy we were giving it, our fear, our arguments, the negative energy from the initial paranormal activity. It had created a cycle, an emotional feedback loop, and it was growing stronger every day. The Warrens requested a formal rite of exorcism from the church. This was a huge step, something the church rarely sanctions. A priest, Father McKenna, was assigned the case. He performed the ancient rite. A battle of wills fought with prayer and holy water. The house went berserk. Objects flew. The walls groaned and shook. A mirror on the wall shattered. We could hear a cacophony of animalistic screams and hateful whispers. For 3 days after the exorcism, there was peace, a profound, beautiful silence we hadn't known for over a decade. We wept with relief. We thought, finally, it was over. We were wrong. The demon had only retreated to gather its strength. When it returned, its fury was beyond anything we had ever experienced. It was no longer just trying to scare us. It was trying to destroy us. The violence became extreme. I was thrown against a wall. Janet was levitated several feet off her bed before being dropped to the floor. The sexual assaults returned with a new, terrifying intensity. The house was a war zone. And we were losing. This is when we made the decision that would change our lives forever. We went public. We were desperate for anyone to believe us. For any kind of help. We contacted the media. A local paper ran the story. Then another. Soon, it was a national sensation. Our quiet life on Chase Street became a circus. Reporters camped on our lawn. Strangers drove by, gawking at the haunted house. Our neighbors, people we'd known for years, turned on us. They thought we were hoaxers, looking for fame or money. They vandalized our property, shouted insults at us in the street. The demon was tormenting us from the inside, and now the world was tormenting us from the outside. We were utterly alone. The final straw came one evening when I was at my wit's end. I was filled with a rage born of a decade of fear and helplessness. I screamed at the empty air, challenging the entity, daring it to face me. In response, a huge, dark mass, blacker than any shadow, formed in the living room. It was massive, filling the space between the floor and the ceiling. It didn't have a distinct shape, but I could feel its intelligence, its ancient, bottomless hatred for me, for my family, for everything good and decent in the world. It began to pulse, and a deep, vibrating hum filled the house, rattling the windows, rattling my bones, rattling my soul. In that moment, I understood. We could not win. We could not fight it. Our only option was to run. In 1987, after 13 years of relentless terror, we moved. We left the house on Chase Street behind. We didn't win. We fled. People always ask me if it stopped when we moved. For a long time, it seemed like it had. The new house was quiet. The nights were silent. We began to heal, to piece our shattered lives back together. But the scars are still there. How could they not be? I still check the locks 3 or 4 times before I go to bed. A strange noise in the night still sends a jolt of ice-cold adrenaline through my veins. And sometimes, things still happen. Small things. The kind of things we experienced at the very beginning. Back on Chase Street, an object not where I left it. A faint, foul smell that vanishes as quickly as it comes. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision when I'm alone in the house. The Warrens told us that sometimes, in cases this severe, the entity can form an attachment not just to a place, but to a person. It wasn't just the house that was haunted. It was us. I don't know what that thing was. A demon, a jinn, Some elemental force of pure malice? I don't have the answers. All I know is that it was real. We didn't imagine it. It took 13 years of our lives and left us with a fear that never truly goes away. It's a quiet fear now. A constant companion that sits in the back of my mind. It reminds me that the world is not the safe, rational place we believe it to be. It reminds me that there are doors. And sometimes, they open. And you can run. You can hide. You can even sell the house. But you can never be sure that you're truly, finally, alone.